All right, here we go. Now, when Ron filled in for me the first night, did he go over the questions at the end of chapter 1? Okay, let's start. Let's do that. Let's get caught up here a little bit because, particularly if you're taking credit here, I want you to fill in the questions here. Page 9 of your book. Now, the answers are going to be in the reading, but it can be a little tricky finding them, digging them out. So we're always going to go over them because, as I always say, the point isn't tough test taking. The point is knowledge retention. Okay, to have the knowledge, and when we study the Bible lands, it is so helpful when you're studying and you're talking about David and you're talking about where he first had his capital, where he spent his first 7 years as king, and you hear that word Hebron, you're going to say, okay, yeah, I remember that. Now I know where that is. And so that's the idea. It helps bring these things to life. Okay, page 9, we'll quickly cover this stuff. What two mountains mark the northern and southern points of the Bible lands? Ararat, Mount Sinai. How many miles long and how many miles wide are the Bible lands? They are 2,200 miles, or 2,200 miles long and 900 miles wide. Okay. Here's one that is pretty easily kind of self-explanatory. What's the name of that rainbow-shaped strip of land between the desert and the mountains that we talk about? Fertile Crescent. Fertile Crescent. Name the 5 large bodies of water that border the Old Testament Bible lands. What's that great big sea that is so important to the Bible lands? Mediterranean Sea. And then way down there to south that we know so much about since 1993 is what? Persian Gulf. And then you have, let me get my glasses up here a little better. You have, what was it that Moses and the children of Israel crossed? The Red Sea. Then you have those 2 big seas up toward the north. Caspian Sea, Black Sea. What lake or sea is both the largest lake and the largest salt lake in the world? Is it the Mediterranean or the... Not the Dead Sea. It's either... Is it the... Yes. The largest lake and the largest salt lake. Huh? Number 5. Okay, I'll skip number 5. I'm sorry. You're right. Number 5 is the Mediterranean Sea. You confused me because I asked the wrong. I asked number 6. The largest body of water in the Bible lands is the Mediterranean Sea. That is correct. Now, number 6 is what lake or sea is both the largest lake and the largest salt lake in the world? Caspian Sea. Now, the Dead Sea is certainly a salt lake, but it's not the largest one. The Caspian Sea is. Now, what 2 bodies of water are on either side of the wilderness where the Israelites wandered for 40 years? What's that? That's it, the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. When you see the Persian Gulf and you see those 2 little, look like little antennas shooting up there, that's what that is. The Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. Name the largest freshwater lake in the world. The Black Sea. Now, when they call the Black Sea a freshwater lake, you don't want to go up there and start drinking out of the Black Sea, okay? Because it is, it's not a true freshwater lake. It does have a certain amount of sodium in it. So, okay, but it's nowhere near like the ocean. So here it's called a freshwater lake. It's not a true freshwater lake. If you want to kind of study up on it and look at it, it's more freshwater than the ocean. Okay, but it has quite a bit of salt in it. What 2 rivers come together to flow as one river into the Persian Gulf? Tigris and the Euphrates. The Tigris and the Euphrates is one of the reasons that we have the Fertile Crescent. It is what waters that part of the world. Name the longest river in the world. The Nile. Just as a matter of information, what's the second one? Anyone know? Amazon. That's correct. The Amazon is the second one. On what mountain did Noah's Ark come to rest? Ararat. And in fact, that's a series of mountains, isn't it? It's not really just one peak out there. It's a series of mountains. What is the name shared by the two mountain ranges side by side just north of Canaan? Lebanon. You have the Lebanon and you have the anti-Lebanon. How high above sea level is Mount Hermon? 9,200 feet. What is the name of the land that is of chief importance when studying the Bible? Canaan. That's what we're all interested in, going to the land of Canaan, isn't it? Who ruled over more land, King David or King Solomon? Oh, Solomon by a long shot, didn't he? All right, those are the questions. I'm not going to require you to, as far as the class is concerned, to label all these maps. Now, it would be to your great benefit if you labeled these maps and you kept this book. But as far as the class is concerned, I'm not going to require that out of you. Now, we're not going to spend time in chapter 2. Read chapter 2. It'd be a benefit to you. We just don't have time to do that. Now, I filled in the map on page 16 myself, different things, but like I say, that would be a benefit to you. Let's look in chapter 3 here. We looked in chapter 3, studied it last time. Again, the maps on 20 and 21 would be a benefit to you. I filled those in. It would help you a lot to do that. Let's look at the questions. Which is bigger, Canaan or Palestine? Palestine. Palestine's quite a bit bigger. When we think of Canaan and you look at the map on page 21 and you look at the Orontes River on the left side of the Jordan, if you to the left of Mount Hermon, that's the northern border of Palestine. Canaan is to the west of the Jordan River. That's what the land of milk that flowed with milk and honey. It was to the left of the Jordan River, because when we study about the Israelites going to go in and take the land of Canaan, what did they have to first do? They had to cross the Jordan River to go in there and take that land, didn't they? Now we do know that some of the tribes, they wanted to take their inheritance on the west side of the river, didn't they? But they had to agree to go in and help their brethren take the land of Canaan. But the land of Canaan itself is on the west side of the Jordan River. What is the name of the coastal plain between Mount Carmel and the city of Joppa? If you look on the map and you see that little part that juts out into the Mediterranean Sea, kind of looks like a little thumb jutting out there, that's Mount Carmel. And from that down to Joppa, if you look at your map right here, you see this part right here. This is Mount Carmel. And all the way down to where you see the rivers, that's Joppa. Now this plain right through here, what is that plain called? Plain of Sharon. Okay. Now, name the important plain east of Mount Carmel that is the crossroads of the Fertile Crescent. We looked at that last time on the map. What's that called? Yes. Yes, both. It's either the Valley of Jezreel or the Plain of Esdraelon. Now, what is the name of the low hills between the coastal plain and the Central Range called? The Central Range is west of the Dead Sea. The coastal plain is obviously along the coast of the Mediterranean. There's this bumper zone that separated the Philistines from the people of Israel. What's that area called? Shephelah. Shephelah. What is the name of the southernmost city in Palestine? Beersheba. Beersheba. It is about 120 miles from the source of the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. But how far does the water actually travel? 200 miles. It's so crooked, isn't it? The Sea of Galilee has been called by at least 3 other names. What are those names? Tiberias, Chinnereth, and one more. Gennesareth. Gennesareth. How far below sea level is the surface of the Dead Sea? 1,300 feet. What about the bottom, the seabed? 1,300 feet. Pretty easy to remember, isn't it? Where did Elijah confront the prophets of Baal? Mount Carmel, that little thumb-looking area that juts out into the sea. Name the mountains of cursing when Moses stood up there before the children of Israel went into the land of promise. Ebal. What about the Mount of Blessing? Gerizim. How high is Mount Hermon? 9,200 again. On what mountain peak did Moses die? Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo is east of the very top of the Dead Sea, to the east of it. So it's close enough to where he could, if you recall, look over into the land of promise, but he was not allowed to go in there. All right, let's get over into chapter 4, verse 24, the patriarchy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at some geography related to the patriarchy. Okay? Patriarchy, a compound word meaning father and rule. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because when we look at the 3 great dispensations of time, we have the patriarchal rule, we have the law of Moses, and then, of course, we have this Christian dispensation. Now, under the patriarchal rule, who was the priest? Head of the family, head of the clan, right? The father. And so that's what we have here. When we think of some of the more famous patriarchs of the Old Testament and those who offered sacrifice, who are we going to think of? Well, automatically we're going to think of Abraham, aren't we? Who is likely the oldest patriarch of the Bible? Well, Adam. He was the first one, wasn't he? God spoke to Adam. Adam taught his sons what it meant to be a follower of God, didn't he? He taught them how to offer sacrifice. Well, when we get into Genesis chapter 4 and we learn about the sacrifices that were offered, who didn't offer the proper sacrifice? Well, Cain didn't offer the proper sacrifice. And what was that? What he offered? You remember? He offered the fruits of the ground, some kind of crops. I don't know what he brought, wheat, carrots, I don't know, whatever it was, something he grew out of the ground. And what made that sacrifice wrong? Well, that's the thing, wasn't it? We can come up with all kinds of reasons why it wasn't right. It wasn't a blood sacrifice. Now, that very well could be why it was wrong. Because it very likely needed to be a blood sacrifice. But the main problem was that through the patriarchy, the one who taught, the one who was the priest of the family, told them exactly what it needed to be, and he brought the wrong thing. And if you recall, God had a talk with Cain, didn't he? And he talked to him just like a father would talk to a son. He didn't talk ugly to Cain. He said, here he asked him a question. He said, why are you upset? Why are you mad? Do you have a good reason to be angry? If you offered the proper sacrifice, of course I'm paraphrasing, if you offered the proper sacrifice, I would have accepted it. But if you're going to be angry, he described it this way. He said, sin crouches at the door, meaning it crouches at the door. It's ready to jump and attack you and put you in a situation where you do not want to be. And so he warned Cain. And how was Cain's response to that? Completely ignored it like a rebellious son would do. And he went out and, of course, he murdered his son. Well, or his brother, I'm sorry. And so, but what we learn here is God speaks to and he teaches through his word, and the patriarch of the family was the source of that. Okay? So God puts out his information through the patriarchy, and he gave some information to Adam and Eve. Okay? And he included in that some things that he wanted Adam and Eve to do. And he gave them some instructions. He wanted them first to populate the earth. He wanted them to exercise rule over the earth. He wanted them to care for the Garden of Eden. And do not eat the fruit from a certain tree. So here's what we understand. We learn a lot of things from that, from those instructions. When Adam and Eve was cast out of the Garden of Eden, and one of the punishments was that Adam would earn his living from the sweat of his brow. Work wasn't the punishment, was it? Work wasn't the punishment. He was always had to work, care for the Garden of Eden. What was the punishment? Now he had to fight with the weeds and the thistles and the thorns. It wasn't going to be an easier labor. He had to labor anyway. He was given something to occupy his time. He had to work. God has always expected work. And he's always expected obedience. Do not eat from the tree of a certain, or fruit of a certain tree. Offer the proper sacrifice. Do what I've asked you to do. It's not that difficult. And so we see those types of things. And so he continued that instruction. And that brings us up to, we learn a little bit about this place. We talked about how the instruction comes. Now, this place called the Garden of Eden, what we see here is these two rivers. You have the Euphrates and the Tigris. We'll see a little better depiction of it in a moment. But they come, or they empty into this Persian Gulf. Right here's Ur. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Here's Haran. That's going to be important to us. This Fertile Crescent comes all the way. You see this stream of waterways, comes all the way down into this land of Canaan over here, and this in Palestine in general. So we have this Fertile Crescent. Okay, now we don't know exactly where the Garden of Eden was, but some speculate it was somewhere around in here because there were 4 rivers, okay, that watered the Garden of Eden. 2 of them we still know today. That's called the Euphrates and the Tigris. Okay, the Tigris was at one time known as Hiddekel, okay? And it has its source high in the Taurus Mountains. Hiddekel flows 1,150 miles before merging with the Euphrates River, okay? And then they join together and they dump into the Persian Gulf. They become one river for about 100 miles, okay? And then they dump into that Persian Gulf. The Euphrates River begins in the mountains of modern-day Turkey, okay? Modern-day Turkey. It travels almost 1,700 miles southeast before joining the Tigris River. And it is known also as Shat al-Arab. And again, they flow for about 100 miles together. Now, not only were these 2 rivers the primary source of water for the Garden of Eden, they also contribute most of the water for this Fertile crescent. Okay, if it weren't for the Tigris and the Euphrates River, that part of the world would be almost uninhabitable because of its climate. It's very arid. It's just simply a desert. So, this piece of land extends from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. North of it are mountains, and south of it is, of course, desert. Now here you go. Here's a better look of it. You have the Tigris to the north. You have the Euphrates to the south. And Babylonia, or the Chaldees, right around in here. Okay? Of course, Chaldees became known as the Chaldeans. Babylon became a real problem for the children of Israel, didn't they? They carried them off into captivity along Assyria also carried Israel off into captivity. But this is where Abraham originated. And then he ended up, of course, over here. Well, I'm having a problem here. Here we go. Now this is this area here is just simply known as Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means land between the rivers. Okay, land between the rivers. Of course, that makes sense. Land between the rivers, between these two great rivers, emptying into the Persian Gulf down here to the south. South here is Ur. Again, here is Haran. Damascus is an important city to us. Jericho, Bethlehem, Jerusalem. Again, we have Jerusalem. Slightly to the northeast, we have Jericho. But when you go from Jerusalem to Jericho, how do you go? How do you describe that? Going down. Going down. We're going to notice again here in a moment why. This city up here to the north, Tarsus. Why is that important to us? Paul is from there. Paul, Saul of Tarsus. But again, here's Canaan. Canaan. Okay, Canaan. Here is Mount Carmel. North of there, from about right here, down to about right in here. That's what you have for the land of Canaan. Why is this doing this? Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Great Flood and what happened with the Great Flood. Noah was born a little over 1,000 years after creation. Okay. Now, if we want to add up all the numbers, and we've been given the ages, and thankfully people who have a little more patience than I do and enjoy numbers a little more than me, and we have a lot of those folks in here, so we could depend on them a little more than me. But a little more than 1,000 years after creation, Noah comes along, and 600 years after he was born, God decides that he's had enough, because the people of the world have begun to behave in such a way that he does not appreciate. Now, I want you to notice here in your book, I don't agree with this wording in your book, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you'll notice where it says, between the creation and the great flood, mankind became very wicked. Do you see that? I agree with that. God destroyed the world with a great universal flood because of man's great wickedness. That's true. And much violence. That's true. Now here's where, I don't know where Brother Rushmore really comes up with this. Much violence by both man and beast. He's interjected that himself. Okay? If you read Genesis chapter 6, verses 6 through 13, Moses records for us that God has decided to destroy both man and beast, but he does not say anything about the great wickedness and much violence by both man and beast. That's not in there. And I don't understand why Brother Rushmore put this in there. Beasts are not violent outside of the realm of their what's the word I'm looking for? Their what? Their instincts. Okay, that's all an animal has is instincts. Can they be very violent? Absolutely. I don't want to go to the zoo and jump over into the lion cage, because they'll absolutely make it so you can't come out there. But that's just the way they are. That's their instincts. Okay. Uh, yeah, but yeah, that's probably why he did it. But as I look through this, he's pulling a little something out there I think is not there, and so that's why I want to bring that out. God's displeasure was toward humanity, and their the thoughts and the intents of their hearts were only evil continually. And but I think you're right. That's where he come up with it. But he's mistaken. He's 100% wrong there. And so, but the way he described it here, wicked and much violence by both man and beast. Okay, I'm going to have to disagree with him on that. But anyway, we move down, and he adds here, and we talk about this. Some students of the Bible believe dinosaurs roamed the earth between creation and the flood. Well, absolutely. Absolutely, they roamed the earth between the creation and the flood. That's when God created any animal that ever lived, was between the creation and the flood. And here's something else. Those little fellas went right on the ark with the rest of them, or those big fellas. The average size of the animal that went on the ark was about the size of a sheep. And what we know is that just reasonableness will tell you they didn't want to probably take full-grown animals onto the ark, because you don't want to have to deal with fighting animals. You want to take babies on there if you can, because they don't put up much of a fight. And if you can take some eggs on there, well, then do that. And let them warm up while you're on there and then hatch when you come off. That's the best thing to do. But, huh? Less weight to manage. You don't have to feed them. All kinds of good things come with doing it that way. So, but the violence and the corruption or corruptness attributed to both man and animals and God's displeasure toward, he says both here. Now look, because everything was destroyed does not mean that God had displeasure in animal life. Does sin have effect on the innocent? If someone is being sinful, that can affect the innocent, right? That doesn't mean that the person that is being affected and is innocent had anything to do with it. Have you ever known a family whose daddy was a drunk and an alcoholic and he refused to work? That wasn't those babies' fault. It wasn't their fault that their parents were drug addicts and alcoholics at all. But it affected them, didn't it? And they suffered for it. And so there were a lot of animals in this world that died. In fact, they all died. All the land-dwelling animals died except for those on the ark. Now, you had some birds probably that didn't die. Well, no, I guess the birds were on the ark as well. You had some aquatic animals that didn't die because they were in the water, but everyone else or everything else died. And so that was man's fault, because he was not behaving and following after God's laws. And so after a period of time, And we see all the evidence of a universal flood throughout the world. I read one time as I was studying about a universal flood, the Sphinx over in Egypt. You can see the destruction on the side of a Sphinx, and one archaeologist took a picture of it and sent it to another one. And all they did was take a picture of a section of it, and you couldn't tell what it was. All you could tell was erosion. And sent it to another famed archaeologist and said, "What kind of erosion is this?" And the guy wrote him back and said, "Well, it's obvious it's water erosion." And then he sent him the whole picture, and then he was so upset that he did that. He said that was I can't remember now the words he used, but it was underhanded is what he meant, because you didn't send me the whole picture and let me know so he could, format his answer to fit that this was in the desert and there's no way water could have got. Well, there is a way water could have gotten to it. It's just like the Grand Canyon. Who else been to the Grand Canyon? Okay, I've been to the Grand Canyon. That's not really my thing. I wouldn't, as I stood at the Grand Canyon, I wouldn't call it beautiful. I would call it amazing. I would call it awesome. It didn't even look real to me. But that didn't happen over millions and billions of years. One good flood, and boy, there you have. Mountains rise, valleys sink. That little Colorado River down there in the bottom didn't cut that gorge. That's not how that happens. Anyone with any sense can tell you that. But finally, the flood began to recede. How long was Noah and his family on that ark, by the way? I'm sorry, I'm deaf. I can't hear. How long? Yeah, they were on there a little more than a year. And they came to rest where? On this series of mountains in Ararat. And have they ever found that ark? We never have found that ark, have we? In fact, there are some people, though, that believe that they have found that ark. What's going on with this thing? It's causing... But anyway, Mount Ararat is over 21,000 feet above sea level. It's between the Caspian and the Black Sea. And on the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, it came to rest on Ararat. And there it is. And I believe Ron was telling me that this came out of a Chattanooga paper. You see that? Now, brethren, that there is the ark. Okay? That's what these fellas say anyway. And he was telling the story that that was the ruins of, that's what they thought the ruins of the ark was. They thought they found little pieces of it. And he was telling that, who was the brother that used to run, the scientist used to run the Gospel Journal? What's his name? Oh, Dr. whatever his name is. Anyway, he said, Ron pointed this out, and I thought it was pretty interesting. He said, if you could find a pile of boards that you thought was the ark, could you prove it? Because what is gopher wood, by the way? Yeah, we're going to have a hard time ever proving that, aren't we? Well, we're never going to find the ark because God doesn't want us to find it. And we didn't ever find it for a reason. Can you imagine what would happen if all of a sudden we found the ark, and we found the Ark of the Covenant, and we found the shroud that was wrapped around Jesus' head, and we found all these things like that. The original 10 Commandments, or the second set that Moses brought down off the mountain. Can you imagine what people would do with those things? Oh, they'd be idols. It'd be terrible, wouldn't it? And so after the flood, God called on this man we know as Abram. Later he became known as Abraham, didn't he? the father of many nations, and he told Abram to leave his home. And what was it that Abram told him? He didn't barter with him. He didn't say, "No, wait a minute here. I've got it pretty good here in this place called Ur." Because it wasn't a place that was just as well off to have left as not to have left. It was a modern place. It was a good place to be. And Abram said, "I'll go." And it was kind of like my great-grandmother, my daddy used to tell me about. She loved to travel. She lived to be 94, and he'd go in there, and she never had been anywhere, but when he got grown and was able to take her places, he'd go and say, "Okay, Granny, we're going to go somewhere." And she'd say, "Okay, let me get my spit can." As long as she could grab her spit can, she was ready to go. But anyway, Ur of Chaldees, we looked at it a minute ago, was a chief city on the Euphrates River of the Fertile Crescent. And it was there where Abram was born and where he was reared. It's where he lived. And so he was going to leave his father's house. Now, what does it mean to leave your father's house and you're going to take them with you? He wasn't just going to grab a couple items. He took the whole shooting match with him, didn't he? His father left with him. His wife left with him. And what was her name? Sarai, right? Her name, by the way, changed as well, didn't it? She became known as Sarah. Sarah. Can you see, Faye? Am I right in your way? In any way, someone else went. His nephew, Lot. Lot went with him. And they went north to a place. Oh, there we go. They went north to a place called Haran, or Haran. So they made this long trek, and they didn't have cars or planes or trains or automobiles or anything like that. So they hoofed it all the way up there. They might have had a camel or two. And so they went all the way up to Haran, and it was there where Terah died. And they were there. Again, this is part of Mesopotamia, known as the land between the lakes. And so from Haran, they would end up going down to these places that are so familiar to us: Shechem, Bethel, Gerar, Ai. Ai was that little small town, wasn't it? It was, in fact, so small that after the children of Israel crossed the Jordan River and they whipped up on Jericho really good, and they sent some folks up into Ai, they came back and told Joshua, "Hey, this is no problem. We're going to go up in there and take care of these folks. We don't even have to have very many people to do that, so don't even worry about it." Well, there was a problem, wasn't there? What was the name of that fellow that was in the company that was a little bit greedy? Achan. He saw a Babylonish garment, and he saw a wedge of gold, he saw a few other things, and he wasn't supposed to take those from Jericho, but he did. Because the first fruits belong to who? They belong to God. They always belong to God. But he decided he would take those. And so, anyway, we see all those different places. We see this place called Kadesh Barnea, south of Beersheba. Man, did you advance that? Oh, did it work? And this is causing me high stress and anxiety. And I never have high stress and anxiety. So anyway, okay, here's a good picture of it. Shechem. What's a Shechem? Where's that place? What do we know about that? Yeah. They had a big problem in Shechem, didn't they? For a lot of reasons. But the Lord also appeared to Abram in Shechem, and later is given to the tribe of Ephraim. But Dinah was taking advantage there, and a couple of the boys of Abram went over there and whipped up on everybody, and it caused a little problem later on. Now let's Let's move ahead here. Now, notice this. God told Abram to get out of Ur. Why do you think he needed him to leave Ur? That was it, wasn't it? This is called a ziggurat. This is a temple. This is a temple that's there today. And it's where you worship whatever it is. I guess you want to worship there, but it's certainly not God. And so Abram did not need to remain there because he was a worshiper of the true God of heaven. And if he was going to be a progenitor of God's people, he needed to get out of there because not everyone, and we look back at the people that came out of Abraham, they weren't all stalwarts like Abram was, were they? Now, Abraham had a few problems of his own, didn't he? He was just a man, and he had a few problems, and he told a lie or two, and God had to straighten him out a couple of times. But he had to get out of here, and he had to go somewhere where God would tell him. That's something that's amazing. God didn't say, okay, Abram, I want you to load up your stuff, and I want you to head north to this place called Haran, then I want you to hang the left and go back south, and I want you to do this and do this. He just said, I want you to get your stuff and go to a place that I will tell you once you get on the road. And I don't think we give enough credit to Sarah. We don't talk often about her during this scenario of load your things up in this tent and head out, because that was going to be a little tough on her. She had it pretty good down there in Ur Chaldees. And now she's going to load all her stuff up, all her household items, all of the people who are taking care of some things for her. She's having to run the household, okay? And I don't read about her complaining or fussing at Abraham. And now, did she have the ability to fuss at Abraham? Oh, yes, she did. And I don't read about her doing it in this instance. So I don't think we give her enough credit sometimes because of this. And so he gets out of there. He heads over to Canaan, and after the death of Terah, God sent him over into Canaan, and he took with him his wife, Lot, a whole lot of possessions and many servants, Genesis chapter 12. And again, Canaan, we need to remember this, was the land of Palestine west of the Jordan. And a lot of people think of Canaan and Palestine as the same area. It certainly was not the same area. Shechem, again, was the place where the Lord appeared to Abram. In Canaan, it was a walled town in the hill country, later given to the tribe of Ephraim. Now, Ephraim would become a very large tribe of the land of Israel. And Hosea, the prophet, would often refer to the northern tribe of Israel as Ephraim. That's what a great tribe they were. Bethel, the city of Bethel. Abram camped near the town of Bethel, and that city was about 12 miles north of Jerusalem. What is so important about the city of Bethel, or maybe not so important, or maybe infamous about the city of Bethel later on, years into the future, after the problems with the divided kingdom came about and Jeroboam became king in the northern kingdom? What did he do in Bethel? You recall, he set up a golden calf there because that was pretty close to Jerusalem, wasn't it? Don't go into Jerusalem. You don't have to go that far. I'll put a golden calf here, and this will represent, that was the idea, wasn't it? This will be your God, because isn't that what happened in Exodus chapter 31 and 32? Aaron said, if you remember when he was trying to explain his way out of trouble, I took all this gold, these earrings, I just threw it in the fire and out walked this calf. And, the idea was, make this golden calf, that's the God that brought us out of Egypt. You see, their minds, it wasn't that they necessarily wanted to worship an idol. They wanted to be able to see and touch the God of heaven. That's how short-sighted and a lack of faith they had. They wanted to believe in the God of heaven, but they wanted to touch Him. They wanted to see him. And so that's what happened in the city of Bethel so far into the future. So let's see here. Here we are. We are back here at the Fertile Crescent. And we see down here, I can't see. There's Ur. Let me back up a little bit. Okay. Now, Assyria. See, we have Babylon down here, the Chaldees in between here. Assyria would later on come on down here and carry off the children of Israel also. Land between the river. Here's our land of Canaan. Maybe get a little better idea here. Here is the northern border. That's the Orontes River. And we go all the way down here to this desert. That's the southern border. Okay, you see Kadesh Barnea. So down below that would be this desert. Nothing happening down here. So that'd be the southern border. That'd kind of be a protection. And then, of course, we have the Jordan River here, and then the Great Sea right here. But this is your land of Canaan. This is Palestine right here. That encompasses all of it. And you've got a couple of tribes, 2.5 tribes on this side, and you got the other tribes over here. But that's a pretty good representation right there. Now they were supposed to come in here. And they were supposed to get rid of all these Hittites and Perizzites and Hivites and all these Jebusites. What did they not get rid of? Well, they didn't get rid of these Philistines for sure, did they? And there's some of these guys floating around. You got these Amalekites and these Kenites and all these other ites running around. And it caused a problem, see? And what would happen later on, they would marry into the Israelites, and Micah and all those other prophets would have to say, look, you're in some bad marriages here. You got to get rid of these strange women. And then we see, of course, the downfall of Solomon and all of these other ones. We got Mount Hermon up here, and Tyre and Sidon, and all these other places. Now, let's see here. There's Haran. This is the trip that Abraham made on the way down here to Shechem and Bethel. There's that little town of Ai where they messed up. Let's get over here. Look at some of these other. Okay. Now this is Bethel, I believe. That's an actual picture of Bethel. And that is where Jacob had the vision of the ladder and the angels coming up and coming down. And so that's an actual picture. I don't know how modern that is, but it's pretty close. Not too far. Now, we'll talk about because of this great famine that that happened in Canaan, Abram went to Egypt. And we remember upon him going down into Egypt, he had his wife Sarah with him, and we recall that she was a beautiful woman. And what was he afraid would happen? They'd knock him in the head, drag him off, throw him in the ditch, take her for his wife, right? And so he said, listen, you need to tell them that you are my sister. Now, well, she was his sister, wasn't she? Yeah, she was his half-sister. But what was she really? What was she more than his half-sister? Well, they were married, so he was telling a lie. And so a half-truth is what? A whole lie. And so what we learn here is sometimes the servants of God also sin, for which they must repent. And God understands that. Now, he doesn't overlook that. He doesn't say, oh, okay, that's okay. No, that's not okay. And we see that in 1 John chapter 1. You must walk in the light, and if you say you have no sin, you're a liar and truth's not in you. But to remain walking in the light, you must repent of that sin and remain walking in the light. So, as time rocked on here, we get over to Genesis chapter 13, and his son Lot ran into a little problem because he decided he wanted to go down to this place called Sodom. Lot grew into such a big people. His herds got so big, Abram's herds got so big, and they decided they couldn't coexist together. So Abram came up to him. He said, okay, we don't want to have a problem here, so I'm going to let you choose. Now, that's a problem in and of itself. How should Lot have responded to that? Lot should have said no. Absolutely. He should have said no. You brought me out of that place down in Ur. You brought me with you. You've taken care of me. Because of you, now I'm wealthy. You choose. But no, he was being selfish, so he chose this place called Sodom. Why did he choose Sodom? Oh, well watered, boy, it looked good. And he was a herdsman, right? It fit right into what he wanted. So he chose that. So he went over there. Now, we understand that was nothing but problems. Ultimately, he lost his family. Okay, lost his wife, lost at least 2 daughters, lost at least 2 sons-in-law because of that. And also, he ended up being taken captive when Sodom was plundered, Genesis 14. So good old Uncle Abraham, he took his 318 servants who made up a pretty good sized army, so he must have been pretty wealthy. And he went up and he rescued Lot up north. And because of that, he came on back down. Now there's something else too. He followed his captors to the city of Hobath near the city of Damascus. Damascus they claim it to be the oldest continuously occupied city in the world. Now I don't know whether that's true or not. But anyway, Damascus is on what were anciently called the Abana and Parfar rivers. Who do we know that's connected to the Abana and Parfar rivers? Naaman. He didn't want to go dip in the Jordan River 7 times, did he? He wanted to go back up to the Abana and Parfar rivers and dip. But anyway, that's up around the major trade routes in the Fertile Crescent. So anyway, on the way back from rescuing Lot is where Abraham met Melchizedek at Salem. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Salem. We're going to have to end here because it's 5 till. But anyway, Salem, Jerusalem, okay? That was the home of the Jebusites. This is the same place, okay? And it is at that place where Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. In his loins, the patriarchs and the Levites paid tithes to Melchizedek. We'll read about that in the book of Hebrews. Hebron, the plain of Mamre, later known as Hebron, became the home to Abram. Hebron was in the hill country of Judah, also David's capital for the first 7 years. And it was Abraham where he bought a burial plot near Hebron. Gerar was a city in southern Canaan inhabited by the Philistines, and it was there that Abraham, where he lied again about Sarah not being his wife in Genesis 20:1 through 2. So we have that lie being told in Genesis 12, and then we have it being told in Genesis 20. First time it was to the Pharaoh, and the second time it was to the Philistine king. Let's see here. Let's get over here. And so we see the map here. There's Mamre, that's Hebron. There's Sodom. Okay, this is kind of where we believe that Sodom and Gomorrah likely existed. We have no idea. There's not a stone. There's not a stick. There's not a piece of glass. When God destroys it, it's out of here. Underneath the Dead Sea, very likely, is where this place existed. Sodom and Gomorrah got exactly what they had coming. Way too many. I didn't take near enough slides out of this. There's talking about Jerusalem and Melchizedek. There's Beersheba, Bethel, Ai. There's where the Mount of Olives. Beersheba, Mount Moriah. Where is Mount Moriah? What do we know about Mount Moriah? Where Abraham took Isaac. Mount Moriah became one of the hills on which Jerusalem was built. Right across from Mount Moriah is the Mount of Olives, where Jesus went every day the last week of his life to pray. It's also where the cave of Machpelah is. Machpelah was the only property ever owned by Abraham in the land of Canaan. Okay, here we go. Burn this into your mind. This is the Mediterranean Sea, Mount Hermon, 9,200 feet. Mount Tabor, Mount Gilboa, Mount Ebal. I can't see. What's that say? The Mountain of Cursing. Okay, here's the Mountain of Olives. Mount Moriah, right here. Mount Zion, Jerusalem. Right here. Now, if you want to go to Jericho to the north, you have to go down the Dead Sea. So we see it's all about where you're at on sea level. Okay? That is a wonderful picture. Now here we go. You have Mount Zion right here. Here's Mount Moriah. Here's the Kidron Valley, the Mount of Olives. Now here's the Valley of Hinnom. Okay? Now, brethren, this is where the heathen nations sacrifice their children. This is where the city dump was. This is where they burned dead animals. This is where the beggars would go and sleep to be warmed by the fire. This is where the worm does not die. And so when Jesus talked about Gehenna, this is the illustration right here, the Valley of Hinnom. And there was a constant fire going on right here, the Valley of Hinnom. And so it was a living illustration when Jesus spoke of this. So they knew full well what he was talking about when he said, where the worm dieth not. And it was a constant fire. And so there was not a better illustration. But we see where Abraham went to offer the sacrifice of Isaac, and eventually the whole area became known as Mount Zion, Jerusalem. But you have the four hills that make up this. You have the Kidron Valley, you have the Galilee Spring, but right across it is you have the Mount of Olives, where Jesus would go every day the last week of his life to pray. That's the Dome of the Rock, which is in Jerusalem right now. Okay, let's look at the questions really quickly. Patriarchy is a compound word meaning what? Father and rule. Man, this is going to be aggravating. I wanted to be able to do this so you could see it much better than me just saying it, but we ain't got time to mess with that. Unless you want to advance it. Okay, just advance it. Patriarchy was a family type religion. Judaism was a national type religion. And the gospel is a universal type religion. What is the only religion given by God for all men everywhere today? He said it is the gospel. I said Christianity, so gospel Christianity. Whose family was first to whom God spoke under the patriarchy? Adam and Eve. What four instructions did God give the first couple in the Garden of Eden? Populate the earth. Exercise rule. Yep. Not to eat the fruit of a certain tree. Okay. What two rivers were in the Garden of Eden can still be found? Tigris and Euphrates. What is another name for the Tigris River? Hiddekel. After the Tigris and Euphrates merge, they travel for how many miles to the Persian Gulf? 100. And what's the name of it? Shad al Arab. How many people were on the ark? 8 people. Why God destroyed the world with universal flood? For what 2 reasons? Great wickedness and much violence. Did the water of the great flood cover the whole earth? Absolutely. The ark came to rest on what mountain? Mount Ararat. What was the name of Abraham's hometown? Ur. What was the name of Abraham's father? Terah. Where did he die? Haran. What does Mesopotamia mean? Land between the river. I always want to say land between the lakes because that's where we go hunting. What Rebecca, Isaac's wife, was from where? Mesopotamia. We didn't mention that, or I didn't mention it, but that was in the right reading. Where was Shechem, or Shechem? In Canaan, between Mount Ebal and Gerizim. Bethel is how many miles north of what city? 12 miles north of Jerusalem. Why did Abraham go to Egypt? That famine. Why did Lot choose to live near and finally in Sodom? Choice land, well watered. True or false? Abraham and Lot took a vacation in Dan. Yeah, I'd say false. On what 2 important rivers was the city of Damascus built? Abana and Pharpar. Major trade routes in the Fertile Crescent crossed at what city in chapter 4? Damascus. What is another name for the city of Salem? Jerusalem. Okay, well we didn't move into chapter 5, but let's answer those questions. You'll know them. We didn't read it. Who was the king of Salem? Melchizedek. Wait a minute here. Wait a minute. We're not done. We're still doing this. What city became home to Abraham and was where he bought a burial site? Hebron. Twice Abraham lied about Sarah being his wife. Where was he the first time he told this lie? He was in Egypt. And where was he the second time he told the lie? Gerar. At what city did Abraham dig a well and plant a grove of trees? Beersheba. On what mountain did Abraham offer or was told to offer Isaac? Mount Moriah. How old was Abraham when he died? 175. I think Ron said that the Social Security office was so glad to get rid of him. And the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Okay, let's look in the questions on page 31. The twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah were Esau and Jacob. Which son was born first? Which son was a hunter? Which son was a shepherd? Which son's name was changed by God to Israel? Jacob. Who was the king of the Philistines in Isaac's day? Abimelech. The promises God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were about what? 3 things. Land, seed, and Christ. So you could say descendants. How did Jacob trick his father into believing he was his brother Esau? Food, clothes. He smelled like him. Put that fur on, right? He was a hairy man. Uh, Isaac was how many years old when he died? And in what city? 180, and he lived 5 years longer than his daddy. Where was Jacob when God spoke to him in a dream and repeated the promises first made to Abraham? Bethel. That was the dream about the ladder. All right, now here's one that it's kind of a tough one. Name the children of Jacob. These two need to be swapped. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Now, Dinah is thrown in there somewhere. I don't know where she came along. First four belong to Leah. And then Rachel, not wanting to be outdone, she drug her handmaid in on the deal, and then the war was on. I'll give you a few minutes there to write that down, and if you don't have it yet. But it's Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And then Dinah, I put her at the end because I don't really know where she belongs. Huh? Yeah, she belongs to Leah somewhere. In what city did Rachel die? Who knew that without looking? I didn't have any idea. But it was Bethlehem. Bethlehem. Now, what happened at Dothan? Joseph sold into slavery. All right, brethren, I'm sorry I kept you too late. Try to hammer it, trim it up a little bit next time, get a little closer to time. I apologize.